coach the person to success, you empower them with knowledge and help them build a network, and you invest in the person instead of tasking out the individual thing, right? So I'm going to help you become who you need to be to go move this number from X to Y and develop the skills that come along with it. And then you show them how it's measured and you coach them along the way, instead of saying like, hey man, why don't you try a carousel? Because I read an article that they're performing really well, right? It's just like a vast difference. And so once you realize that you need to get clear on your numbers and hold people accountable to outcomes and help them become the version of themselves that they need to be to go hit the number.
Welcome to the podcast. Nathan Newberry here, your host. Super pumped that you guys are tuning in. I have Matt Verlaque here that's going to be sharing his story just about how he's been into SaaS and fitness and family. We're going to see some really cool stuff in his story and his origin story, being even a fireman, and really kind of going from there, from coding. We're going to hear some really cool insights and techniques about what's important. He has a cool SaaS company that's building data and really kind of helping people really kind of analyze with stuff. So you guys are going to hear some really cool stuff. Stay till the end. And we're going to really kind of help you out with really kind of understanding how to build not only a SaaS proper company, but really some insights about how high performers work. And before we jump in with Matt's conversation here, I want to give you guys a free gift. So many times people are trying to build an online brand and they just really suck at it, or they're just not sure where to start. And I have a free training I want to give you guys down below in the show notes of how to do sales, how to do ads, how to build everything you need with AI nowadays. So that's going to be a really helpful training. Grab that down below. Matt, as we're diving into it, I ask everybody this question because I think everybody wants a clear direction and definition of someone that's wired like us, that's a little different. But what is high performance? What does that look like? How do you apply that?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. It's a good question to start with. So in my mind, high performance is two things. It's setting very specific goals and then following through on the commitments that you make to yourself about those goals. If you do those two things, you're a high performer. If you fail at either one, your progress is usually not going to materialize. And most people do a better job setting goals and a worse job following through on the commitments that it takes in order to hit the goals. That's usually where I see it break down, and that's where I've broken down on it personally. But if you can master those two skills, right, of setting the very specific goal, and I'm happy to walk through how I do it, but setting the goal and then following through on the commitments and the standards of action that it takes to achieve the things you said you wanted to achieve, it's inevitable that you end up becoming a quote unquote high performer, at the end of that journey.
Yeah. And I think we all love that definition, but it's hard at the very beginning for entrepreneurs to define what they want, right? And so they're like thinking, okay, I want goals, but then how do I achieve them? Trying to really plan out the leading lagging indicators of actually achieving it. And then inevitably will arrive at that destination once they have that in the North Star. But sometimes they're like, well, I want this, I want that, and they're not clear. How have you gone about doing that for yourself?
Yeah. Like the goal is the easy part, man. Like people who win and people who lose, they all got the same goals, right? I mean, you can always you point at stuff and say you want it, or you want to, achieve this or earn that or whatever. Like that's not actually where the difference gets made. So the way that I go through this is I'll set the goal and then I'll figure out like downstream of the goal, like what needs to be true with my actions, the things that I can actually control, like the standards that I set in my life, the things that I do every single day and every single week. Like what needs to be true about those actions and standards to make hitting the goal inevitable, not just possible. And so the thing that I focus on, like, yes, I'll look at my goals and make sure that, I remember why the hell I'm doing all the goofy stuff that I do in the first place. But the thing that I really care about is, am I living up to the standards of action that I committed to? Because as long as I do a good job up front, mapping the standards to the goal, as long as I do the things that I said I would do and do them with a level of consistency that most people aren't willing to put in, you'll hit the goal, right? You'll figure it out. You'll make it right over time. But honestly, dude, most people just don't do enough reps and they don't hit it with enough consistency, or they'll, come off the gas too early because it didn't work in the first 3 weeks of the year. And like, that's where most people lose the game.
Yeah. Consistency is huge for sure. Well, tell us a little bit, Matt, like what you do. How do you serve people? So that the audience here gets some context of what you do.
100%, man. So what I do right now is I help entrepreneurs understand their numbers so they can figure out how to grow faster and earn more money. Like that's what it comes down to. I have a very strong belief that most people who are operating a business that has revenue and customers, you have the answers to growth already. You just don't know how to
Absolutely.
see them. And so that's what my superpower is. I can sit down with someone in a couple of hours and map out their entire business from a numbers and data and leading indicator standpoint, show them everything they need to measure every Monday morning to figure out how to grow. And so that's what I do. I have a software platform that, we trained an AI model, and it spits out all the dashboards and does all the performance tracking. I do, coaching and consulting to help people figure this stuff out, but it's all based around solving that one problem, which is knowing your numbers and growing your company faster.
I want to dive into that here in a minute here, but a lot of our audience wants to hear the origin story of like where this all began. Tell us
Yeah.
like the journey from being a firefighter and being married and having kids and running different software. Like, tell us some of those stories of the journey of being an entrepreneur too.
Yeah, I always say that I accidentally started a software company, because I didn't set out to leave the fire department. Honestly, like that was the first thing that I feel like I was ever good at. And I didn't really have any plans of leaving. I was just got promoted. I was in a really good assignment. And I was really happy. And so it was interesting. Just sometimes life throws things at you and they show up and you have to make a choice. And so, I had started, like I learned how to code in like middle school. I'm almost 40. So what that meant was like Notepad and HTML4 and maybe a little C++, for any nerdy people like me listening. And I never really did anything with it. And then in the fire department, my shift partner, Jake, opened a CrossFit gym in Pennsylvania and asked me to help him with his website. And that was what got me back into coding. And I learned some WordPress development, did that for a little while. And then he and I ended up trying to figure out just how he could grow his gym while we were both at the firehouse, 24 hours at a time, 3-4 days a week. And this was 2016, like email marketing and automation was kind of just becoming, like the commodity like it is today.
Yeah.
And so we set up some marketing automation strategies for his gym, and they really started working like exceptionally well. And his gym in a 9,000 person, town started growing really, really well. And so kind of one thing led to another with that. We, packaged up the strategies we used for his gym. We started giving them away and doing some like consulting with other gym owners. And eventually we realized that if we wanted to put this thing on rails, we had to go build some software. And so I went to a coding boot camp, taught myself how to code, found a really smart guy in my class and kind of bullied him into being our CTO. And man, it just started to snowball. And it's funny with the family angle because like the fire department by itself is an intense career. You're there for a lot of hours every single week. You're spending 1 out of 3 days sleeping at the firehouse. And then so is creating a startup. And so I was doing 2 of these things at pretty much maximum intensity at the same exact time. And I was married and I had 2 kids under 2 years old.
Yeah.
And finally, my wife pretty much just pulled me aside and she was like, look, dude, I don't really care which job you do, but kind of need you to pick one because this sucks. And so it was in that moment, that clarity, I was super grateful that I married someone who would, hold me accountable too. And so I decided it was time to go all in on the software and the business because like I couldn't ask anyone else to bet on me if I'm not going to bet on me. And it was just it's a leadership principle at that point. So
is it you or your wife that's more of a risk reverse? Who's the risk taker?
I'm the risk taker. She's risk averse, but I think that I was just kind of hand grenading our home life by working 100-hour weeks, for so long, especially when we had a, infant kid. So, but it was definitely, I'm definitely the risk taker.
I'm going to ask you this question because more often than not, the way that we're wired is we're obsessed, just absolutely obsessed with things, and it deteriorates, or it can be pretty detrimental to our spouses and our kids in the wake of our obsession. How did you end up building that gap with your wife?
Well, so it's interesting, dude. I did it really freaking poorly for a long time. And I worked myself right up to like all through this first company, even after I left the fire department. Like I worked my way up to and past the burnout line. I was 70 pounds overweight. I'd never worked out. I was like, an engaged dad, but not, I don't know, like I was like an emotionally engaged dad, but I probably didn't have a ton of energy for the kids at the time. And I was just putting everything I had into the business. And there's 2 sides to this coin, Nathan, because on the one side of the coin, especially for your first company, and especially like I didn't grow up with money, like I didn't have like, whatever rich parents who were like, hey, here's 500K, go do your little business thing. Right. Like we were scrapping, dude. And so like sometimes that's what it takes. Like sometimes it's going to suck for a while and you have to like steal from one area of your life to feed another area of your life. I do think that that's a reality for most people, especially in your first company. So I think the thing that I focus on is being acutely aware that you are robbing from certain areas of your life to feed other areas of your
Mm.
life. I think we get into trouble when you don't realize what you're doing. And then all of a sudden it sneaks up on you and you realize you haven't paid attention to your spouse or your kids or your fitness or your community or any of those other things for years on end. And so
Mm-hmm.
it was absolutely like single tracking, like just work until I fell over for years. And the real trap is like continuing to do that when you no longer have to, because I think that's what, like, for serial entrepreneurs, I'm on my like third legitimate company, I guess fourth technically, but dude, it's like you get so used to working that way that you don't realize that you don't always have to work that way. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
after that first business, I started applying the same time management and time blocking strategies that I use in business and applied it to all areas of my life and carved out a lot more balance that way. So I think that, there's a lot of things we're willing to do for our company that sometimes we're, for whatever reason, we don't think to do them for our spouse or our kids or our
Mm-hmm.
community or our hobbies or our fitness. And I just treat everything the same now.
What was that breaking point that got you from 70 pounds overweight to the fit guy you are now?
Yeah, well, so it started out, I started out with fitness, man. Like I was, like I did an Ironman when I was 24. When I was in the fire department, the firehouse, we were working out every day. Like we were doing CrossFit before it was cool. It
Mm-hmm.
was like, that was the culture. And especially once I left the firehouse and working out was no longer a part of my job, it was just this for 16 hours a day,
Yeah.
talking on Zoom and writing code. And that's where I lost it all. And so, dude, it was a breaking point on so many things. So we were like in the middle of selling the company. And for those of you who haven't been through that, it's crazy because you have a business to run and then you're trying to handle the transaction, which is like another full-time job on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like wildly out of shape, like mentally exhausted because I've been running on burnout for years, trying to negotiate this transaction to get to the finish line. And then right in the middle of all that, my mom unexpectedly passes away on top of
Oh
it. And
gosh.
it was just like universe, like keep piling on, whatever, like I'm not going to break, and I just like had to get through it. And so, dude, I remember like we got the deal done. We closed the transaction. Like I took my kids to Walmart and bought them like Transformer action figures.
Mm.
Like, so we're going to celebrate, whatever, just, keep it regular. And, yeah, the next like month or two was kind of crazy. Like, we had the funeral for my mom and I started getting the company integration done.
Mm.
But dude, it was about 2 months after, like I was working for the company that bought us or whatever. It's like 2 months after the sale of the company. And honestly, I just like sat down one day and I was just kind of like, fuck this. Like, I just can't live like this anymore. And, it's like I finally crossed this threshold professionally. And I was like I'm an idiot if I keep going
Mm.
this way. Like I'm robbing from my kids. I'm robbing from my wife. I'm headed towards a freaking early grave. And honestly, it's not what being a high performer is in any sense of the word.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that was it. And I don't know, like I bought a bike and I was like, well, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I know I used to do triathlons. So I guess I'll start with that. And I started riding the bike and it was crazy because that was 2020. Right. So that was 9 years after I did an Ironman. So 9 years in 2011, I did a full Ironman, 140.6 miles. And in 2020, after I sold the business, I couldn't run around the block. Is that block outside the same window I'm sitting at right now. And I
Mm.
had to jog for 2 minutes and then walk. And that's where I was at. And it was just like, wow, humbling. Right. And so I was working back from that. So I just started riding the bike every day and, jogging a few times a week and then started hitting the weights and just had to claw my way back from whatever. But at least I'd been there before. So I knew what it felt like,
Yeah.
and it was just something that had to happen.
I hear it quite often that fitness has been super helpful for clarity of mind and
Yeah.
really taken serious that in every area of your life. Has that dripped into your family and your kids? You have young boys,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
your wife too. How has that affected their thought and mentality of, respecting the body and really priming all that?
In all of them, honestly, because like that whole season, I mean, it was, there were a few challenging family things that happened. And so, but yeah, like the couple of years after that season of life. I mean, yeah, my wife and I, between the two of us, we'd cut well over, 100 pounds from ourselves. Our kids are playing sports and stuff like that. But I'll tell you, it's cool. Like, so my oldest kid is 9. And it was probably 3 weeks ago where he was like, "Dad, I want to go to the gym with you. Let's go." And I was like, "Cool." It's like a snow day. And so I threw him in the Jeep. We went to the gym, and it was just like this beautiful, 30 minutes together. It was like leg day for me. So like I did some squats and he's doing air squats next to me. And I was like, "All right, I'll pick an exercise. You pick an exercise." And he was just had this experience where he was able to go, just try out some dumbbells or try to do some sit-ups or do whatever he wanted to do. And it was just, dude, it was super fun. So I think it's cool to just see them getting those values built inside of them from an early age. Cause I mean, I didn't have that growing up at all.
Right.
So it's cool to see that cycle get broken.
And then as we're transitioning, I want to hear about like some things with entrepreneurship. Like
Mm,
when I'm coaching my clients, they often don't know two key metrics, which is leads and revenue, which is
sure.
so freaking important. And I remember Alex Ramosi talking about his early beginnings. He's like, I didn't want to look at my money. I didn't want to look at it. And then now he looks at it every single day.
Yeah.
And that habit has then helped him be super aware of how to spend, where to invest, all that. And you've tackled this by building a software that handles this. Like, why is it important? Let's just talk about that. Why is it important that we should be looking at that data, and what is the opportunity if they do?
Yeah. So think about it for a minute. Like time is the answer to everything, but like just walk through it in your head for a sec, right? Like if let's say you look at your money every month, right? So, okay, we made this many sales in January, made this much money, whatever. So then you sit down, and by the time you like get your books figured out on how you did on the month, it's whatever, a week into the next month. So then maybe that's, February 7th. Cool. Now I know how I did in January. Then you sit down with your team and you're like, "Oh, what do you think we could do to make this strategy a little bit different?" And then it's February 14th and you're halfway through the month. And by the time you do anything to actually change the outcome, it's March already.
Mm-hmm.
And so what this boils down to is that if you're moving at that pace with that long of a cycle time, you're getting 6, maybe 7 shots on goal of course the entire year if you're only evaluating your results of your strategies monthly, because you lose the entire month pivoting because you're making bigger chunks because the size of the data you're looking at is larger. And so the way that I approach this, and like the highest performing companies that I know do this on a daily, but at least a weekly, like every company on earth should be looking top to bottom across, there's 9 key areas of a business that I coach people to measure. And every company should be looking at key metrics in all 9 of those areas every single Monday morning for the prior week. And if you get into that habit where you're making smaller changes and you look at like rolling weekly progress instead of like these monthly aggregations, you can start to figure out your leading indicators. You start to figure out the small moves that you can make Monday to Monday to Monday to Monday to Monday. And you get, whatever, 52 shots on goal to fix your strategy at a smaller level instead of 6 or 8 shots on goal to fix it at a larger level. Because everyone thinks they have strategy problems, but the reality is that 98% of people have execution problems, because you can execute really well on the wrong strategy and still grow a pretty damn cool business. But you can have the best strategy and do a poor job executing and fail 100 times out of 100. And so like it's always an execution problem until proven otherwise. That's my approach to everything.
What are those 9? I'm curious now.
Yeah. So the way that I look through this is every business has 3 funnels. And I work mostly with recurring revenue businesses. So like a lot of coaching and training companies, ton of software companies, obviously, but it holds true for any business on earth. There's 3 funnels that I teach. The first one is the one you talked about, which is the one everyone talks about. It's your revenue funnel. How am I making money, right? So you've got your 3 areas in there. You've got how am I getting attention in the market, got how am I generating pipeline and capturing the demand, and then making sales, right? So get attention, capture demand, make sales.
Yeah.
Pretty basic. That's the first one. Second funnel is delivery. My subtitle for this is I got paid, now what, right? And so in a recurring revenue business, the first thing we need to measure is what I call your first value moment, right? Your activation. So in software, it's like that moment where they're using the software tool and they're finally like, yes, I get it. Like I got the value. I understand why I did this. So that initial experience is crazy important. That's the first one. Second one is ongoing customer health. So are they happy over a longer time horizon? Then the third is around customer support. Like, are you giving them world-class support when they raise their hand and say that they need help? If you do those 3 things well, you're going to retain revenue, right? And so that's the thing with the recurring revenue business. You can have the best sales systems in the world. If you do a bad job on delivery, they're going to churn, they're going to bounce, and you're just going to build an insanely frustrating hamster wheel.
Yeah.
So that's the middle ones. And then the last one is what I call the leverage funnel. These are the things that if you do them right, everything else in your company and your life gets easier, cheaper, and faster, right? So they're social proof. Make sure that you're getting testimonials and case studies from your clients. It's team health, making sure you're hiring A players and that they're fully engaged, and making sure your financials are dialed in. Mm-hmm. And so those are the 9, broken down into 3 distinct funnels. If you measure those and engineer success across all 9 of those areas, there's no way you're going to lose. It's obvious when you look at it that way.
And you have a book as well.
I do.
You have, what is it called again?
Yeah, Software as a Science.
Software as a Science. Do you go into that in that book much?
Yeah. I mean, it's very similar. So that book was co-authored by Dan Martell, Johnny Page, Marcel Petitpas, and myself. And, it's very obviously software focused, given the name, but yeah, it maps to most of these areas, pretty clearly. We don't cover a lot on like team health and stuff like that inside the book, but outside of team health and money, most of those areas are covered in pretty solid detail in the book. It's at softwarebook.com. It's like a free book if you just pay for shipping, but like can snag it. Honestly, anyone who has a recurring revenue business, it will teach you how to grow very, very tactically.
Now, talk to us. Like, that is amazing. People need to know that data, those 9 points for sure with those funnels. I could see that play out in how I coach clients and what I see represented in my business. I could see how the importance of that. How is capturing that data going to help move the business forward?
Yeah, there's a couple of things here, right? So anytime it's interesting. I'm going to answer this like a product question. So anytime I'm trying to build a product or a feature for someone, what I want to know is like, what is the thing you want to do? But then also, what are you doing right before you do the thing? And what are you doing right after you do the thing? Mm-hmm. And so if you apply that same frame to your question, which was a really good question, right? Like, yes, I might want to like look at my data and write my data down in my spreadsheet or my software tool. Cool. You're right. That's not going to solve anything. Right? Then you just have a nice little spreadsheet. But when I say like, what are we doing before? Cool. We need to go into all of our like source softwares or sources for the data. So you're looking at your CRM, you're looking at your marketing platform, looking at your ads manager, you're looking at your employee engagement scores. So it solves the proximity problem, right? To Alex's example that you brought up earlier, right? If you're like have an avoidant personality and you're not looking at your money, you're not going to manage it. You're not going to earn any. It's the same thing with every metric. And so by tracking these metrics every week, the first thing you solve is proximity because you get intimately familiar with the numbers. You build context. You understand seasonality. You understand trends. You understand so much about your business just by putting in the reps of looking at them. Mm-hmm. Then once you have them, there's a couple of key questions that we need to answer about the numbers that have like significant variances or that aren't tracking towards goal, right? So basically we're looking at them. We're saying, why is this number off? Do I think it's a strategy problem or do I think it's an execution problem? And then who on my team is going to be the directly responsible individual for getting this number back up to snuff? And like, if you answer those 3 things and start pushing the work out to the team and build that feedback cycle in the way that you manage them, again, like you're going to find the answer because you can't not find it if you're looking at it that intensely. Mm-hmm. I think most of the problems we have in business are simply by taking your eye off the ball, honestly.
I have a team, and do you have this software set up where there's different dashboards for different people with criteria that they need to move the ball forward, right? Because I have a video editor, I have, an EA, I have a setter, I have closer, like I get different teammates with different things. Like, how does that dashboard look with pulling all those metrics together?
Yeah, so I do a couple of things here, man. So the core principle behind it is it came from, Steve Jobs, I think popularized it at Apple, but the whole concept of the directly responsible individual, which is that any number, any project, any outcome needs to have one human being who owns it, not a team, not a function. There's no one in your company named marketing, right? Like it's a human being who does a job. And so in the software, any metric you can assign to any specific team member as the directly responsible individual. So that's step 1. Then when you're looking at the scorecards, like when you're reviewing it on a weekly call, and when it's like we produce weekly reporting, so you can use that to run your team calls, cool. It shows exactly who owns the metric, exactly what the goal for the metric was, what the attainment percentage is, and you can see it on a chart over the prior 6 weeks. And so like That way, everyone in that call, when you're reviewing this data with your team, they're going to see who owns it, how's the performance trending, how was it last week, and then the last ingredient is that DRI, that individual, should be able to speak, pretty succinctly as to what the strategy is and what they're doing to fix it and bring the number back up.
Yeah. Talk about that journey of understanding that, because you were, as an entrepreneur, you wear every hat, right?
Yeah.
And as you're building a team, you don't know what a scorecard is. You don't know what KPIs are. You're just like shooting from the hip quite often. And even assigning those things to people is not always easy with delegation and leadership. Like, talk about your creation of that and understanding that, and then how that implements into what you build.
Yeah. So it's a leadership philosophy change that I
Mm-hmm.
think every entrepreneur goes through. I think we start out in doing what's called transactional leadership, right? So like if I come and work for you and it's an early stage business, you're going to look at me and say, Matt, go do this thing. Let me know when it's done. And then I'm going to say, Nathan, I did it. And you say, cool, I'm going to go check it. All right, that looks good. Here's the next thing I want you to do. It's a transaction, right? You're handing something to me. I'm handing it back to you. And like, you can build a business up to a couple $100,000 in revenue, probably with a couple of team members that way, but you're still the problem. Like you're still the bottleneck, because eventually the sheer quantity of decisions and like tasking that you're going to have to do is going to fill up your day, and you're going to end up being the blocker on progress because you're the genius with 1,000 hands and everyone's afraid to do anything before they come talk to you. I think most entrepreneurs go through it. I sure as hell went through it. And eventually you realize that it doesn't work, and you're going to stay small forever if you don't fix it. And so the solution is transformational leadership, where you're leading through outcomes. Mm-hmm. So instead, you might say, Matt, like, I'm going to hire you to grow my LinkedIn audience. Right now I'm at 50K and I need to get to 100K by 12 months from now. So I need you to double this thing. You own this number. What resources do you need? You coach the person to success, you empower them with knowledge and help them build a network, and you invest in the person instead of tasking out the individual thing, right? So I'm going to help you become who you need to be to go move this number from X to Y and develop the skills that come along with it. And then you show them how it's measured and you coach them along the way, instead of saying like, hey, Matt, why don't you try a carousel? Because I read an article that they're performing really well, right? It's just like a vast difference. And so once you realize that you need to get clear on your numbers and hold people accountable to outcomes and help them become the version of themselves that they need to be to go hit the number, mm-hmm. all of a sudden you have no choice but to delegate, because you would be undercutting them if you handed them the tasks and told them how to do the job that you just told them to go figure out how to do themselves.
Mm-hmm. There's another part of data I want to ask you too, is they own a specific number, even though there's a lot of numbers that they also need to be aware of. How does that play a part with the overall team dashboard and then owning a specific number for them?
Yeah. So the team is accountable to have context across the entire business, the leadership team, not necessarily every single person in a large company, but if you've got a leadership team of a half a dozen people, someone running sales and marketing, et cetera, the obligation on that leadership team, I call it every hand on every steering wheel, right? Like the marketing person should know roughly what the average net promoter score is of the customer base, what an average churn rate is, even though it doesn't change their day to day and they may not own the moving those numbers. They should have the context and be able to speak to it intelligently. Mm-hmm. So in my world, dude, you don't get to be on a leadership team unless you're willing to lead. And part of leading is understanding the environment that you're in, right? So if you step into the business, you're obligated to know how it works. Now, if you're a CEO or the leader, you're obligated to teach people how it works. Like you need to turn the lights on and share the data and share the insights. But assuming that you're doing that, everybody on the team should have the context. And the way that you build the context is by reviewing these numbers openly as a group every single week, right? And so there's a difference, though, between that, which is being informed about them, and then being the DRI, which means you're accountable to actually changing them. So every metric on the board is owned by someone, but should be familiar to everyone in the call. And if those two things are true, two things happen. Number one is who's going to move the needle and who eventually owns the end outcome. But then you're surrounded by other leaders who can help you find problems and help you find solutions because they know what it's supposed to look like and they know when it's off track. So it's kind of like this beautiful symbiotic relationship, but it starts with sharing the information in the first place.
You had an experience of being a COO at SaaS Academy where you taught, a lot of this, over the years. What were some of the key challenges that entrepreneurs had? And then what made you leap in from going there at SaaS Academy to leap into your own?
Yeah. So It's interesting because the answers to those two questions are very closely related.
Yeah.
So, my journey has been from fireman to CEO the first time, sold the company, to COO at SaaS Academy, and now back to founding and CEOing another company. And so I always knew, number one, that that was going to be the trajectory. Even when I came into SaaS Academy, I told the other two guys, Dan and Johnny, I was like, guys, I probably got 2 to 3 years of doing this, and then I'm going to start another company. Like, it was always the plan.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing was, like, coaching that, I mean, I've coached hundreds of B2B SaaS founders at this point through my years at SaaS
Mm-hmm.
Academy. And it's like every problem they had, the problem behind that problem could be solved by knowing the data and knowing the strategies. Those are the two things. You need the numbers and you need the strategies and tactics to move the numbers. And what I found is that it was really hard to get past the first part because a lot of people just weren't tracking the data. And so it was like almost like Groundhog Day. We're having these same conversations over and over again. And as soon as we could find the numbers, find that the entrepreneurs knew what to do, because entrepreneurs like studying tactics and strategies and don't always like looking at numbers. And so, it's like any entrepreneur, man, you got your ear to the ground, then you find yourself having the same conversation and solving the same problem over and over again. That's what opportunity feels like.
Right.
And so, as I started to talk with people, I found that there's a legitimate opportunity to help founders turn the lights on in their business and show the data in a way where it makes the signal obvious from the noise. And the reason I don't think anyone solved it well, candidly, is because it's really freaking hard to solve well. It's a hard product problem to take data from 15 different sources and show it all in a single view the right way with the amount of math that we've done in the software is bananas. But like, there's a lot of opportunity for our customers on the other side of getting this figured out. So, I mean, it's born out of a true need.
And I could see it as clear as day now that you kind of point this out. And I hope people really take, stock with this. When I ran my marketing agency for 9 years before I sold it, that was always the hardest part for me, to really grasp everything, as well as trying to find data to then present to my customer. Right.
Yeah.
So there was that aspect. And then when I ran sales teams, it was the same sort of thing, where it's like the questions I asked entrepreneurs was all the data that they didn't know, right? That led to the pain that they had, that they wanted to solve that solution, right? And so it's always comes back to the data, because even when I'm on a sales calls, they're like, hey, where are you at with your leads? Where are you at with your offer? Where's your revenue? And they're like, and they just hem and haw over because they don't know the exact numbers. And then, you try to solve that with them with specific things, but and then when I coached, with marketing agency, it was the same thing. It was like, you had to give them clear with it, but now having clear data that's coming from all those things, like, people have had to patch this on so many different levels. So the fact that you're solving this is a huge, I think, relief for so many people, and especially now using AI leading into this with it. I think it only could compound with the North Star being so much clearer with that. With the evolution of AI, let me get your opinion on some of those things there, Matt.
Sure.
Like, how are you integrating with AI? How much of an obsession are you with learning it, and that's affected? Like, tell us a little bit insights there.
Yeah. So I honestly think that, like, look, I'm not one of these doomsday guys that's like, oh, the jobs are going to go away and software is dead tomorrow. Like, some people are like maximalists when it comes to that stuff. But what I do strongly believe, man, is that if you're not familiar and leveraging AI in your business, you're probably screwed, simply because, like, you're going to get outperformed by people who are better at using the advantages that are out there.
Absolutely.
And so, there's a couple of ways. There's like two big ways that I leverage this, and I'll start like super high level, and then we can take it wherever you want. I'm happy to get nerdy and get into details. But, I think that, like, the two areas, like, yes, it's deeply part of our product, right? I mean, so there's really, it's fascinating. There's two sides to the coin on data. So, like, there's some product work, like getting the data into the scorecard, but that's the table stakes. And it's really the analysis and the insights that make what I do interesting, right? And there's two ways that I do this. The first one is exactly what you'd expect in 2025. Yes, we have an AI model. Yes, we have all these prompts that are chained and context and blah, blah, blah. Like, yes. So all of that stuff, put a ton of work, time, and effort into getting the AI model trained up where it can give you the right insights. However, on the flip side of that coin, there is also like 100-year-old math from like statistical process control from manufacturing plants that is also used to figure out like what is like normal variation versus exceptional variation, and when is it just like the number of leads per week bouncing around like it always does, or all of a sudden you have like a legitimate precipitous drop that probably means there's something you need to go look into. And so I think that AI solves many things, but it doesn't necessarily solve everything. And so I integrate both the the older than old school approaches that have, most people have long since forgotten about, and also the cutting edge, and I put them together, and that's what drives the insight. So I mean, that's how we integrate it into the product, but also we deeply integrate it into the way that we run the business. And so like I have it's like an order of operations before I hire someone. So I'm deeply committed to keeping my team small. I want to pay the people on my team a whole bunch of money, and I want to keep them A players, small team, and put as much leverage into their world as possible. So like if we haven't tried to solve a problem with like SOPs and systemization, with automation, with artificial intelligence, with contractors and vendors, like if we haven't gone through that whole list, like then it's not time to hire someone yet, because we still have 5 things we have to try. And so AI in our like day-to-day work inside of our business is also deeply integrated. It's not optional. It's the expectation that you learn how to write a prompt, that you learn how to use ChatGPT, you learn how to use Claude, you learn how to integrate it into your, daily actions of the job that you do, because it's just I want people to be efficient, and I design incentive plans that reward them for being efficient, so they have an interest in doing that.
I love that.
It all works out.
I think that's cool to really kind of incentivize people to streamline stuff. That's a cool way to approach leadership. I haven't thought about that.
Yeah, well, so the way that we did this, man, and I took a lot of inspiration from a guy named Jeff Roberts. He runs a company called Outseta. It's a SaaS company. But so like kudos to him for open sourcing the way that he built his company. So it was super awesome. But I took a lot of inspiration from him. All of our full-timers have equity in the company. And so like there's a natural incentive for anyone who's full-time on my team to make the company as efficient as possible, because that's what drives profitability, which drives their income. Yeah. Right. So it's like not even this crazy over-engineered thing. Like, again, I want a small team of like highly compensated freaking weapons of SaaS. Yeah. And, that's part of how we do it.
And then how much of it do you study? Because it's like there's new like evolutions of how AI is built and software and all sorts of ways to continue to improve. Like, what are you doing to hone that technician side in your way to really kind of make sure you're optimal with using it and performing with your company?
Yeah, I wish I had the time to study for sport, but I don't. So I study for purpose. And what I mean by that is like I don't usually have the bandwidth, especially as an early stage startup founder, to like go, research things for pleasure because I find them interesting, even though there's so many things that I find interesting. I just want to like go read for the next month. But what I do is as soon as I have an actual business reason or an outcome that I need to create, I go ham on that topic. Like I want to learn everything there is and just figure out like what are the best people in the world at whatever that thing that I need to go do. Like, what are they doing? Yeah. I'll give you an example. Like so I wrote code in the first company, but obviously like being the COO of a coaching company for 3 years, didn't really have much of an opportunity to write code. So I was kind of rusty and out of the game. And so when we started Precision, which was in December, like 3 months ago from the time we're recording this, I don't know, like I could figure it out. I started using, AI to like help out a little bit, and I was like making some progress, but I felt kind of slow. And the guy who was my CTO in my first company, he came back in for round 2, which is cool. And he's been coding the whole time. So he's a freaking weapon, right? He's just slinging left and right. And I'm just like, man, this dude's running circles around me. And finally pissed me off enough where I took an entire weekend and I just built an app start to finish. And it was like, build this thing, and it's like, whatever, like integrated into Zoom, and took my recordings and like found like teachable moments from coaching calls and turned them into snippets that I could use for content, whatever. Like not even using it doesn't matter. I just wanted to like go through this process of like not having to be worried about like breaking something that's going to be, this business I'm building, and just like have a project. I just want to see how far can I get in a weekend. And so I like went into obsession mode. I'm sorry to my family because I didn't hang out that weekend. I mean, I was hammering like 12, 14 hours on Saturday and Sunday just coding. And I got probably 85% of the way through this app. And it's not about the app, but the reps that I put in a very compressed period of time, I showed back up on Monday and I'm like slinging features like it's nothing to it. And so it was just this really fun, like, I don't know, man. I learn best by just trying to achieve an outcome at extremely high velocity and just learning as much as I possibly can, because sometimes I think, like probably like you and a lot of other entrepreneurs, like the attention span sometimes is short. And so I just want to like get the thing done as quickly as I possibly can, learn the skill that I need to learn, apply it in the business, see the outcome, go on to the next problem to solve. And so I tend to learn it like in a compressed window of time at a very high velocity to solve a specific outcome. And then I move on to the next thing.
Matt, it's been so cool to talk with you and learn
Yeah,
some
likewise, man. It's
insights
been
of how
fun.
you're doing stuff. How can people follow you even further and connect with you about your data company, your software company, your Precision?
Yeah, so mattverlaque.com. That's everything kind of routes back to there. The website for Precision is precision.co. But if you just find me, I'm on all the socials. You can DM me on Instagram. You can follow my YouTube channel. It's all just under Matt Verlaque. Got a weekly newsletter, post YouTube videos every week. I'm easy to find as long as you can remember how to spell my last name. So Verlaque, and I'm wherever you're looking.
And I'll put that down in the show notes for everybody.
Thanks.
Matt, thank you for being on the show. Everybody, thanks for listening in and tuning in. If you didn't get that training yet around how to build a brand and really start dominating in this world, just like Matt's practicing, make sure to go grab that training down below, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks, Nathan.